Welcome to the Everything Cancer podcast. This podcast is intended for survivors, those who love them, healthcare providers, and leaders of cancer support organizations. Our guests offer insight into the honest survivor experience, how challenges are met head-on, and where blessings are discovered. We cover effective self-advocacy on the bumpy road of cancer survivorship from the moment of diagnosis on. We talk about rekindling intimacy when cancer has changed your world. We are given behind the scenes insight into cancer care because understanding it better empowers you to advocate for yourself more effectively. We hear from leaders of cancer support organizations about their resources and how to access them or those like them. The Everything Cancer podcast welcomes survivors who would like to share their journey and how they have met their challenges, providers who would like to share their empowering insight, and leaders of cancer support organizations who would like to share their stories and resources. We welcome support through sponsors, the Everything Cancer website, and our Patreon page. Please note, the information shared on the Everything Cancer podcast is not intended as medical advice. Please always consult with your healthcare team. The staff at Everything Cancer podcast will not answer individual healthcare concern questions. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy this episode and find it useful. Please do share it with other people if you think they'll benefit from it, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks and take care. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Everything Cancer podcast. We have a dynamic and knowledgeable guest here, Mr. Tim Sohn. He is the host of Showing Up: Perspectives on Cancer, sharing our cancer stories and invisible illnesses. I'm thrilled to have Tim here. His show is amazing, and I strongly advise that you find it on LinkedIn, and Tim can tell us where else we can find it. He is also a best-selling author. He is an award-winning live stream video producer. So he's going to have me up my game today. And he is also a cancer survivor. So he really knows what he's talking about with this. Tim was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia, which he'll give us a little learning on. Tim never planned, he said, on sharing his cancer story publicly, but I'm waiting to hear his story about how that happened, and I'm sure you are too. Tim started sharing his story for the first time in June of 2021, so not so long ago. As a result, he's had a very rich tapestry of experiences since. Tim, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jillian. And tapestry, great word. I like that.
Thank you. But you have a tapestry of experiences that's rich and tangible. I think that you really present things in a really wonderful way that people can relate to and learn from and pull into their own experience, whether or not they have cancer in their lives, but in overcoming challenges or meeting challenges and working through them.
Thank you.
Could you share or explain what chronic myeloid leukemia is?
Sure. So chronic myeloid leukemia is a blood cancer. And what happens is your number of white blood cells grows a lot. It's supposed to be somewhere from between 4,500 and 10,000 for a normal person. Mm-hmm. Mine went up to 400,000 when I was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia. So that's basically the short version of what it is. But basically your blood, your white blood cells, they get all out of whack. And then the next step is figuring out how to solve that. And luckily with CML, there's a number of different treatment options now. I think there's 6. And it's a pretty manageable cancer. Depending on the person, of course, each person's journey is different. But overall, people who have chronic myeloid leukemia are able or have a lifespan that's pretty average as the general population.
One of the cruxes of the matter for you is that it's a manageable cancer. You're always going to be on treatment, right?
Always. I have heard of some people who have gone off of the treatment for a period of time. I don't know if anybody has gone off indefinitely yet, but it may be a possibility down the road.
And maybe also with other genetic therapies and transplant therapies and so on coming around the bend, there might be something. Do you currently take medication for it, Tim?
I do. I currently take something that's called Sprycel. I take 1 pill a day, When I first was diagnosed, I took one called Gleevec. It's spelled Gleevec. And that's basically the treatment for the rest of my life, most likely. The medications are extremely expensive. I believe the Sprycel is somewhere around $10,000 a month without insurance. I'm really blessed to have really great insurance through my wife's employer, but for people who don't, obviously finances are a big challenge for CML patients and survivors, but also other cancers as well.
Well, finding a good financial navigator at one's cancer institute when one is underinsured or doesn't have insurance can really help in those types of situations and help with access to medications. They will find resources for you. You do need to sign up every year. It's not something that you can let lapse, but there is help available, but it's a challenge in the U.S. healthcare system. And also from what I understand in the Canadian healthcare system too, between the basic insurance provided and private insurance through one's employer. Did you have difficulty a challenge getting diagnosed as a young adult with your symptoms that you were having?
I didn't have any problems being diagnosed. Kind of my story is I had found some purple bruises on one of my legs. So I went to my primary care physician, and the next day, I believe it was, he called me up and said, "You need to go to the hospital right now." It's like the longest 2-hour drive of my life, because that's where the hospital was that I went to. Might have been an hour and a half at the time. I was living in New Jersey. And I was in the hospital for 4 days. And in those 4 days, they had diagnosed me with CML. And it's kind of funny because I have had many extended family members have different kinds of cancer. My uncle had Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is the only blood cancer in my family, but other relatives, grandparents, and others have either passed of cancer or there's cancer survivors in my family. But I never thought I would be diagnosed, right? Like you never think you're going to be the one. And then you're like, oh, I have cancer now. And now what? Right.
So those 400,000 white cells were keeping your marrow from producing the red blood cells because they were putting all of their energy into the white blood cells, and also it was keeping your bone marrow from producing the platelets. That's why you had the bruises. And so that's why it's imperative to get the white cell count down so that all of your blood cells can work together the way they're supposed to protect your health and so on. You must have been really short of breath running up and down steps before that diagnosis.
I actually wasn't. Really, the only symptom I had was the bruises, and I don't remember any other symptoms like that.
Well, that's great that you made the call that you did, and I'm sure that your doctor's hair was standing on end when they called you.
That was mine.
They had seen your results. So in what ways has your life changed since you've been diagnosed, Tim, and how have you dealt with those changes?
So kind of what's happened in my story is, so I've had or haven't had leukemia for a little more than 17 years now. And in the first 15 years, I had leukemia. And then for a year and a half, I did not have leukemia out of nowhere, which I was like, yes, but what does that mean? And then it came back again after that period of time in a small amount. So challenges for me, I've been really blessed in that I haven't had any side effects from my medication. And I haven't, like the extent of really being sick, I guess you would say from a physical aspect, is having bruises on my legs. So from a physical perspective, the first 15 years of my life, I just kind of lived life like I didn't have cancer, except I took a pill every day. And I was doing great. And I'm still doing great physically. But then when I got to the point in my journey where my cancer went away and then it came back, from a mental and emotional perspective, that's been the most challenging part for me in my cancer journey. Because it's like, you have cancer and like, I was fine for the most part. Even from a mental and emotional health perspective, I just kind of lived my life. But then when it went away and came back, I'm like, like, what do I do with that? What does that mean? I know I had started the Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer show in November of 2021. And my cancer had went away 1 month later. And I'm like, this is an opportunity for me to make more impact. So then I was doing the show and I was like, need to continue the show, which I was obviously going to do anyway, but then books and then events and just like more opportunities to bring people together. And I think for me, I didn't reach out to any other cancer patients or survivors in those first 15 years. I was living my life and didn't really think much about cancer. But then when I started sharing my cancer story in 2021, that's really when everything changed.
Wow. I would love to know what happened that changed your outlook on sharing your story from keeping it private to sharing it in 2021. What was that watershed event for you?
So I would say there were three things that happened that kind of happened in a very short period of time. A friend of mine named Nancy Barrows, she had created a hashtag movement called Radiating Real, where you share more personal aspects of your life, not necessarily private, but we all get to choose what we want to share on social media and in life. So I started sharing more personal aspects of my life, like my family, that I love coffee, which I've since stopped drinking over the last week or so, which is different because I've been doing that pretty much since college. And then also to feel the love and acceptance and support of people when you share those more personal aspects, because they're relatable to other people. Other people drink coffee. Other people have families. I had also been suffering with chronic migraines, which I still do. And I received a ton of support and love in the comments and direct messages when I did that. So that happened. And then somebody who has passed in the last year, his name's Steve Sullivan. We had connected on LinkedIn, and he was a 35 plus year acute leukemia survivor. And he had shared his story on National Cancer Survivor Day, which this year was just recently.
Yeah.
Seeing him share his story inspired me to want to share mine. And then I was invited on a friend of mine's show. Her name's Jenny Gold, and she had a show called Podcast Not Podcast, where she had conversations with people who had autoimmune conditions. And so I thought, maybe all these things are happening in a short period of time. Maybe it's time for me to share my story. I'm not usually a person who believes in the universe is telling you something, but I thought maybe the universe is telling me something. So I shared it and continue to share it. I've been invited on a lot of different shows like yours. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
And virtual events and sharing it in blogs. And I've also recently had the opportunity to share my story on video for a pharmaceutical company, a huge pharmaceutical company. So anytime I can share my story, I love to do it because other people can learn from it. I love to connect with other patients and survivors and supporters, and so we can all help each other and support each other. And we really become a family after we get to know each other.
I sense that. So how has connecting with other people changed your outlook and changed your perspectives?
I always learn different things from different people I speak to. You know, cancer, whether you're in cancer or you're a survivor, there's different challenges along the way. Mm-hmm. You know, each person has their own journey. And so to be able to have people that in your life who become your friends, really, it helps you in the sense of like, you need support. You know, like I have some people who reach out to me. This one friend I have, he sends me a text message every day and he's saying, praying for you and your family. It's going to be an awesome day. So to have that support, because I think oftentimes people who haven't had a similar experience, it's hard for them to understand from your perspective. So to be able to connect with people, become friends with people, collaborate with people who understand at least some aspects of your story and what you're going through, it just makes it that much better, especially on days that you're just, you're having a crummy day, right? Mm-hmm. And you need somebody to talk to or give you a lift up.
So I would like to share with our listeners that, Tim took sharing his story to a great level that's helped many other people, but You don't need to do that to share your story. You can join a cancer support organization in your local area. That shared experience is tremendous. It's tremendously helpful, and it helps people deal with the challenges. They can bounce off. I facilitate a support group, and I witness members bouncing their challenges off the other members, and the other members fly in with all these suggestions that worked for them, strategies on how to deal maybe with a physician office that you're having a hard time, or getting an authorization for a medication or something like that. But in those conversations, they uplift others. And it is amazing to me, impactful to me, to be in the center of that and watch relief slip over someone's face and weight slip off their shoulders. So if you are dealing with cancer survivorship, symptom management issues, stressors in your life related to your diagnosis, your treatment, your survivorship issues, I strongly encourage you to reach out to a local cancer support organization and find out about local support groups. You can go in person, or you can do virtually, and cancercare.org is a virtual cancer support organization that is in the US and is accessible online. These are all without cost for you. And again, that shared experience, like Tim talked about, really does make an impact on the quality of your life. Your show, Tim, is so powerful for survivors and those who love them. And also providers, cancer caregivers. Thank you for what you do. How has your show impacted you?
Oh, my show, it's impacted me so much. So when my cancer came back, my co-host at the time, she was not available to be on the show that week. And I was like, really? The week my cancer comes back? And I'm like debating, do we even have a show? And I'm like, we have to have a show, because I am not the only person that this happens to. Other people's cancer comes back. So we need to have a conversation. So I decided to do a show. I decided it would just be me, and I would share my feelings. I would share what happened when I heard from the oncologist. But then I invited other people who were watching the show to come on live on the screen with me and share any perspectives or comments that they had about what I was going through, or situations they had gone through similarly. And 2 people had come on. Amanda Ferrero, she's amazing. She's a 2-time acute myeloid leukemia survivor, has had 7 brain surgeries. She's incredible. She's a patient advocate. Definitely connect with her. And also Mark Kageyama. And they both are amazing. And they both came on the screen, and they showed so much support for me. They were like, Tim, you created the show for other people, but you provide so much support for other people, but now you need the support. So we're here for you. And I definitely needed the puffs in that moment. And it was just like such a beautiful moment on the show, because I really did create it for other people. I didn't create it for myself. But the longer I do the show, and especially through that experience, I realized how much I really need the show for myself also.
And that, I'm sure, has changed how you think about things, decisions you make, so on, everything you've learned in your interactions on that show. The episodes can be really profound. So when is your show showing typically?
On Wednesdays at 8:00 Eastern time. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually starting a second show, which is going to be monthly, the first Tuesday of each month. And it's called Showing Up: Perspectives on Invisible Illnesses. Because what I have is an invisible illness, and I oftentimes feel misunderstood because of that fact. I could be walking along, nobody knows I have cancer, right?
Right.
And there's other people in the same situation, whether it's cancer or depression, or whether it's mental or physical. So we're going to have conversations with people about their stories. And it's the same idea, to provide a safe space and support each other. And hopefully we can all understand each other a little bit better through sharing our stories.
I love that idea. I had a breast cancer survivor on this podcast once who really spoke to the invisible illnesses and said that a lot of women that, and this holds true for you and for other people who have metastatic cancers that are on the oral medications to keep their metastatic cancer under control. They go to work, they interact in life, they don't look like they have cancer, but they're experiencing all the side effects of being on that medication. They're experiencing the need to go for scans and go for doctor's appointments. And they said what this survivor shared is that it's a real challenge to get people to understand where you're coming from since you don't look sick. But you are, I mean, your cancer is being held in check by a medication that has a lot of side effects and also can create financial toxicity issues, can create fatigue, which is one of the most challenging symptoms of both cancer and its treatment. It's a really difficult beast to be up against, fatigue, and to gather energy to do something, go to work every day, then come home and deal with your family and so on. So I think that show will really provide a lot of help, Tim. Thank you for putting that together. So where can people find your shows?
They can find me on LinkedIn, or they can go to perspectivesoncancer.com, and there's information there about all things perspectives on cancer.
Okay, great. You are so calm when you live stream, and I'm a nervous wreck when I'm interviewing.
You're doing awesome. I don't believe you.
Thank you. So share your calm nerve secret with our audience so that they can apply the same thing when they're sitting in a doctor's office or something and they're nervous.
I think for me, live streaming is truly a safe space for me. And when people show up to support our guests, to support me, to support my co-host Shannon, receiving that love and support is really what calms me down. The idea behind the show and everything I do is not to be perfect. Cancer is not perfect. The show is not perfect, but it is the conversation that's the most important part of the show. You know, sometimes the backdrop might not be perfect, the lighting might not be perfect. It is important to be able to hear, so obviously the audio has to be good.
Right.
But everything else is really like secondary to me. Even as a producer, it's the conversation that's most important. And having a conversation where people are going to learn from you and we're all going to support each other in that safe space. So to answer your question, I would say it's that the community, my co-host Shannon likes to use the word family. I use the word community, and then she used the word family, and I was like, oh, I love that so much better. It just feels so much more personal. So I would say that's the calm nerves are just the support that's received when we all show up together. That's
beautiful. That really is. So live streaming is a big risk, and I've been considering it, but at least with the podcast, I can edit parts out that I'm not happy with. So I give you a lot of credit for doing that. So without embarrassing anyone, what is one of the most odd things that's happened to you on your live stream? Thank you for tuning into the Everything Cancer podcast. We appreciate you being here with us. If you are finding this episode useful, please share it with others that you think would benefit. And don't forget to rate us with your favorite podcast platform. Please check out the show notes for more information and more information about our guests, links to their websites, and any other resources they've shared. We aim to make it easy for you to connect and learn more about the valuable insights shared in each episode. We welcome support through sponsors, the Everything Cancer website, and our Patreon page. Please stay tuned for a brief word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to our episode. Thank you so much. Do you have a dry mouth that distracts you with that nasty feeling and taste? H2 Ocean has your solution, literally and figuratively, with its sea salt healing rinse. It's made from salt from the Red Sea, and it has other minerals that are beneficial to you in it. It also has lysozyme enzyme, which is soothing to the inside of your mouth, and xylitol, which makes your mouth water. It's very mild in flavor, yet refreshing. does not make you suck in your cheeks like often happens with other mouthwashes, and it stays with you. Other mouthwashes, they're gone in 10 or 15 minutes. This has stayed with me for a few hours now, and it's great. I plan on using it before every podcast episode to keep my mouth moist without taking distracting sips of tea and so on while I'm talking. The links to the H2 Ocean sea salt healing rinse will be in the show notes, and then a QR code also on the YouTube version of this podcast. It's excellent to help rinsing with chemo mouth or irritation in your mouth from radiation, but mouth sores and just general everyday use. I find it really pleasant and really helpful to use. I hope you do too. Thanks.
Oh, this is a really funny story. One of our guests, Brian O'Sullivan, he's a patient advocate and he's amazing. He was joining us from his car, and we were trying to get everything figured out, but for some reason he kept showing up upside down before the show, and we were trying to figure it out, and it was time to go live, and we were still trying for maybe 5 minutes, and then we're like, we're just gonna go live and hopefully everything will be good.
Okay.
Well, after the 5 minutes came and we brought him on, he was still upside down, and it was hilarious. He did figure it out after a few minutes, I think. But when he came on upside down, we were all just cracking up. And I'm so glad he had a great sense of humor, because if it was a guest who didn't, it might not have gone over so well. But just to be able to have that humor in the moment and roll with it. And that's one of the things I love about live is you never know what's going to happen. And even if it's not perfect, we can laugh about whatever, or we can relate in whatever way. Yeah, that's what I love about live. I could do an edited podcast if I wanted to, but it's just not my preference, because I love the spontaneity of live.
Right. I appreciate it. I enjoy it, and it's very engaging, and I appreciate the risk that you're taking while you're doing that. I imagine there have been times that you've had to, either you did start to cry or you've had to hold back the tears with some of the stories or experiences people have shared with you.
That definitely happens from time to time. Mm-hmm. I know it happened on the show when my cancer came back. I always have the pups nearby. I don't need them too often, but we kind of joke around about it. We're like, we have the pups, we have the Kleenex, But, one of the things about the show is that, yes, we definitely have moments where we cry, or we're serious, or we're happy, or we're silly, or we're smiling. Mm-hmm. And it's those whole range of emotions, which probably in every person's cancer journey, all of those emotions are going to happen. And I think those are well reflected in the hour of the show.
I absolutely would agree with you. So you have developed books based on your podcast, right?
Yeah, 2 books.
And all of those emotions and people overcoming challenges. Tell us about your books. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, so there's 2 volumes so far. There's a book called Perspectives on Cancer. Cancer patients, survivors, and supporters share their stories. And that book has my cancer story, as well as 11 or 10 other people share their stories from all those different perspectives. And they're all people in the first volume who have been guests on the show. And everything I do is really with the goal of letting other people know that they're not alone, and encouraging them to share their stories when they're ready, if they're ready at some point, whether that's just with family and friends, whether that's in a public setting, whether that's in a group, like you were saying. I really encourage people to do it at their comfort level.
So where, for our listeners, where can they find your books? Where can I find your books?
They could go to perspectivesoncancer.com. And also there's a second volume that came out called Perspectives on Cancer, Stories of Healing, Hope, and Resilience. And that has the stories of 15 cancer patients, survivors, and supporters with the same goal, the same idea. And a few people in that book haven't been on the show also.
So if someone wants to share their story with you, how would they reach out to you, Tim?
They could go to perspectivesoncancer.com, or they could connect with me on LinkedIn, either way.
So what do you like about LinkedIn versus other social media, say Facebook or something like that, for what you do?
So most of our engagement and viewers from the show come from LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because I spend most of my time there. I've connected with lots of people, cancer patients, survivors, and supporters through LinkedIn. Even one day a few months ago, somebody reached out to me, and she just found out that day that she was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia, like that day. And she said, "Hey, I wanted to reach out to you because I'm so frustrated and overwhelmed, and I don't know what to do." So I said, "Do you want to get on a call?" And I was like, "Sure." And she was like, "Sure." So I got on a call, and she was like, "Would you share your cancer story with me?" And I was like, "Sure." And I started out, I was diagnosed 17 years ago with chronic myeloid leukemia. And she said, 17 years? Like, really, 17 years? And she just like had this big smile on her face. And I was like, yeah, and this is what I do, and this has been my journey. And she felt so much better after having a conversation with me, because I'm still here 17 years later and doing okay.
Yeah.
And that's really like, having those interactions is what keeps me wanting to continue doing all the work that I do, because it's not easy. Like, having conversations every week around cancer, having cancer, books, events, like, it's a lot of work. But this is why I do it, because I want to give people.
A couple of the guests I've listened to. So can we go on your website to find previous episodes? How do we find, if we want to say, binge listen, how would we do that?
Probably the best way is to go to the YouTube channel. If you just search for Perspectives on Cancer, it should come up. There's also a link to the YouTube channel on perspectivesoncancer.com.
Okay. I'm going to go there today.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So, I very much appreciated how, the one guest I really listened to shared how she got through a tough chemotherapy treatment and how she interacted with the staff and the strategies that she talked about for getting through, RCHOP. And it was, I found it, I'm an oncology nurse, so I have that clinical perspective. I have a deep appreciation for the issues with survivorship through, all of the facilitation I've done over the years and just hearing the nitty gritty of how things are. But what she said, I thought was incredibly helpful to other people listening. And here she is looking wonderful and talking about it and basically saying, yeah, it was tough, but I'm here and I did okay. And I think there's such value in that when someone's terrified, to, like this person called you and talked with you, to understand they can get through it and come out on the other side. One of the things I consistently hear Tim talking about that is it changes you as a person. That diagnosis changes you. And maybe yours 15 years down the road when you were diagnosed again, it sounds like that was a really difficult and challenging event for you. How has that changed your life?
So I would say it has made me a more vulnerable person, especially since sharing my story. I was not as vulnerable before that. I live my life more intentionally. I want to do things that are more fun, something I've always wanted to do my entire life is go in a hot air balloon. So last year for my birthday, and it's almost my birthday again, so it's almost a year ago, I went in a hot air balloon ride in New York State. And so, like, thinking, like, you never know, not like to be negative or morbid or anything, but you never know when we're going to die, whether we have cancer or not, right?
Right.
So, like, thinking intentionally about, like, what do you want to do, or what do I want to do while I'm still here, right? And one thing I really wanted to do is go on a hot air balloon ride. Another thing I wanted to do was I hadn't been to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade since I was a kid. I grew up in New York City. So this past Thanksgiving, we went to the parade in New York City, and it was a lot of fun with my family this time. Live it now, because you never know when something's going to happen.
I would have never guessed from the way you talk that you grew up in New
Really?
York City.
I've lived a lot of places since then. I live in Pennsylvania now. I've lived in New Mexico, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Connecticut, New York, and here in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So I'm probably a very confusing person.
I think that the living intentionally is something that is, I wouldn't call it a gift, because who would call cancer a gift? But I think it's a silver lining that many people find, because you didn't necessarily have that appreciation before the diagnosis of what living intentionally really meant, and being involved in every moment, listening well to the others around you, and really understanding what they're saying instead of multitasking and it kind of being half or a quarter in your brain. What have you found, like on a nitty-gritty level, what have you found living intentionally? How has that changed your day-to-day interactions?
I'm not a very planned person anyway, but if I end up having a conversation with somebody and it was only supposed to be a half an hour and it turns out being an hour, like, that's okay. And maybe I have to move another conversation, or maybe I'm not feeling well one day, and normal, or like in the past, maybe I would have tried to plow through that conversation even if I was feeling like crap. I think now I'm more intentional also in terms of asking for what I need and want. Before, I was a very much just go with the flow kind of person. And now I am more intentional in terms, like, if there's something I really need or really want, like, I'll express that to whoever the person is. And oftentimes that person is somebody who's like very close in my life. And so that's changed me significantly in terms of just how I go about living my life, just like rolling through day by day versus like, I really want this, I really need this, and I'm going to communicate that, and I'm going to really push for that.
I think that's a skill that is really difficult to learn,
yes.
But it is invaluable, and it's a game changer. So something that a lot of people have difficulty with is asking for or accepting help. And that's so important. So if somebody's offering to give you a ride somewhere, say, sure, give yourself a break from that. And also give yourself the company. Having someone go with you to one of your appointments, if you feel that there's going to be a complex conversation, that second set of ears can really help. Or if you're nervous about the conversation you're going to have, just that moral support can make a really big difference. Asking for and understanding, first of all, what you need is a big challenge, but once you really think through it, you probably can identify it, and then, or what you want, and then asking for it in a way that maintains a really solid, warm, trusting relationship.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the conversations aren't so warm.
Right.
Like, if you really want something and you really need to fight for it, the conversations at first, if you make the switch from rolling through life to asking for what you need and want, sometimes those conversations are going to be they're going to be uncomfortable, and they may not be so warm and fuzzy at first. It takes some time to get used to it.
Right. It does. How do you turn that ultimately into a successful conversation, Tim?
I think it's really a lot of listening, but also expressing what you need and want. And over time, as you do it more and more, you'll get more comfortable with it and how to go about having those conversations. And sometimes you have to compromise, like everything isn't always what you want in life. So, sometimes whatever it is may not happen, and that's okay. But keep going, keep pushing and fighting for what you need and want, because that's important.
A really good tool to get started, asking for what you need, expressing what you need, or something you want to achieve, is making notes about it so that you can think through, and then making talking points for the conversation. And the
Yes.
talking points serve a couple different purposes. First of all, you intentionally thought, how are you going to state your case? How are you going to express your concerns? And one part where this is really difficult is dealing with your intimate partner. If you need to change things up from an intimacy perspective, because you might have pain with intimate relations, and who wants pain with that? So trying to make things more comfortable and introduce maybe a different concept in that. And so, writing your thoughts out can really make a big difference. They also serve a purpose to glance down at, to remind you of what you want to say, but to gather courage. Sometimes when you have the other person's eyes boring into yours, like boring into your soul, is helpful to take a break from that and glance down at your notes and kind of get your thoughts squared away again and gather a little bit of courage, and then go onward. And you can always table the conversation and go back to it and say, hey, let's go take a walk and listen to the birds and finish this up tomorrow, and everybody can settle down. But then the person you're dealing with can also let it percolate a little bit, and they can think about what you were saying. And you made a key point, Tim, that listening well is huge with that.
For sure. And I think also another tool that I've used and other people may want to consider, and I don't think is talked about enough, is going to therapy. I've been going to therapy for, I don't know, more than a year now. And one of the main things I focus on that in those sessions is talking through conversations, and the therapist kind of helping me to guide, like, what might a conversation like this look like, especially when it's uncomfortable. And seeing a therapist, for many reasons
Right.
with cancer. One other reason that I went was because I was dealing with survivor's guilt, because I haven't had a lot of physical effects during my cancer journey. It's like, how do you deal with that, especially when you're having conversations with patients, survivors, and supporters on a weekly basis?
Wow. That's deep. I hadn't thought of that aspect, but I could see where that would weigh on your shoulders.
For sure.
I'm really glad you talked about therapy.
Thank you.
You're
Can I ask you a
welcome.
question?
Sure.
As an oncology nurse, how do you, from a mental health perspective, take care of yourself?
It took me a long time to get there. So I am empathetic, and I care, and I really work hard with people in terms of self-advocacy and helping them remove barriers to what they need or what they want. And I do that professionally in an acute care setting, part-time as a case manager, and I do that with my content creation. So that gives me some sense, but I need a break from that too. I need a break from those conversations. I need a break from those thoughts. And what I have found is being intentional really helps. Walking outside and listening. Birding is my zen. I'm the birding nurse on LinkedIn, as you saw, but listening to bird song, identifying birds, watching them. My husband rolls his eyes at how much money we spend on bird food every month, but it's so worth it to me because it really does help protect my mental health. I have considered therapy. I wouldn't be surprised if I enter it down the road, but, so it's a combination of knowing that I'm making a difference for people and seeing oftentimes the results of those differences, but then really taking good care. I appreciate you asking. I really do. Taking good care of intentionally taking care of getting a break, and it's a real break, and giving my mind a rest from those thoughts. So, and that I think green space is a really good place to kind of reset your thoughts.
Yeah, I love nature as well. And thank you for allowing me to turn the conversation to you. See what happens when you have two hosts on one show.
That's good. That's good. So one of the things, I have a book out there called Cancer Journey Guide and Journals, Empowerment and Diagnosis, Treatment, and Beyond. And it talks about journaling and many other tools, but you don't have to buy the book to be able to advocate for yourself effectively.
But where can people find it?
They can find it, Tim, on Amazon under Jill Squire, under the birding nurse, and also under the title, which is a long title. But the last chapter, Tim, is a chapter of puns. And I have that in there because sometimes conversations get really heavy, or you have a doctor that doesn't smile very much, or you have kids around and you just kind of need to be able to relate to them. So being able to pull out a good pun at the moment, sometimes that laughter can ease a lot of tension in a room. So I was wondering if you brought a fun wordplay pun with you.
You know, I totally forgot this question. And I don't know one off the top of my head.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But we're wrapping up laughing, which is good. So I'll ask you this question. If you were a bird, what bird would you choose to be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. You have really good questions. Oh my God. What bird would I be? I don't know. A bird that you could just fly and like sometimes when you're in a cancer journey, you just want to escape. And so to be able to fly to somewhere where you're just by yourself and having time for yourself, whatever that bird is, that's what I would be.
Okay. I'll find one for you.
Thank you.
Hummingbirds are very solitary.
Okay.
And they're extremely resilient and strong. So most birds migrate in large flocks. They do not. And they have one of the longest migratory routes around. So they spend a lot of that time alone.
That's my bird.
There you go. That's your bird. I like it. Yes. I like it. Is there anything we didn't cover, Tim, that you would like to talk about?
I would like to, first of all, say thank you. And secondly, there's also an annual in-person event I host called the Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer in-person event. And it's coming up on October 5th and 6th. And you could find more information at perspectivesoncancer.com. And we have an incredible lineup of inspiring speakers who come. We also share our cancer stories in small groups, which is really cool to be able to do that in person as opposed to online. Both are awesome, but in person is just a different experience. We also play games. We act like children. We have fun. And you leave with more family and friends that you know what to do with. But it's just a great time to connect and learn from each other, have fun with each other, share our stories in person. And
I love it.
perspectivesoncancer.com.
And you're looking for some support for that for people that maybe could not afford to make the trip on their own.
Yes. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, the link is there people can either sponsor the event. We have 3 different packages, or there's also a GoFundMe I set up for the event. And all the money either goes towards helping cancer patients and survivors with travel expenses, or also just toward the operation of the event, because it costs a lot of money to put on an event between the venue and the food and the marketing and all the things. So
right.
Appreciate anything you can do.
Is it free for cancer survivors to attend?
As of right now, it's not. It has been the last 2 years. And that may change in the next short time period.
Okay.
But as of right now, it's not, just because there's expenses.
Well, sure. A lot of expenses like you were just talking about, but maybe if you get some support, it will come down, or you'll find a way to manage it to make it, I'm sure, more palatable to many people. It sounds like a phenomenal event. It really does. It sounds great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an incredible last 2 years, just having the opportunity to meet people that many people who come have either been guests on the show or they are in the comments of the show. So to be able to meet people in person and just can give people hugs in person, that's really awesome.
Right. Especially after what we've been through the past few years.
For sure. Yeah, my first in-person event was delayed because me and my whole family got COVID. And so I thought I was going to be able to escape it by going to my sister's house, but then I gave her COVID. So that didn't work out so well. But hopefully things will work out better this year.
Yes. Yes. I can't wait to hear more about it. And so to attend or to support it, go to Tim's website, which is Perspectives on Cancer, correct? .com.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And Tim, I really appreciate your time here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation and can't wait to have you on my show at some point.
Oh, thank you. Are you going to surprise me with the question I didn't expect?
We'll have to see. You never know what's going to happen when it's live, especially.
I guess so. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Everything Cancer podcast. We hope you found the conversation as insightful and as inspiring as we did. Remember, all the details about our guests, including their contact information and links to resources they've shared on their websites, will be included in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting us by visiting our website, checking out our Patreon page, or becoming a sponsor. Your support helps us to continue to bring you these important discussions. Don't forget to subscribe to the Everything Cancer podcast on your favorite platform and follow us on social media. Always remember, the information shared here is not intended as medical advice. For any personal health concerns, please consult with your healthcare team. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back with us again next time. And for anybody that you have invited to join us, please reach out if you would like to be a sponsor. We would welcome you. Thank you.